say a little bit about the program and some of the things that people, I know I've just had a conversation with, somebody in this group going, oh, I wasn't sure whether to come or not because, people seem to have done these huge things. Well, some people have and some people haven't.
Yeah.
And so we've got like a sort of, a history of helping to support many, many different kinds of projects within many different kinds of communities, some on huge global type scale, and some
just
really
personal.
that are just very personal, that are just about themselves. When I say the word just, pretend I never said that.
I didn't know
that are about themselves.
I feel mindful.
And so, we've had so the program is really, it's about asking questions in many ways, like what does it mean to try and kind of do something that's from your heart and soul?
Yeah.
What skills and resources and your own kind of special gifts do you want to be more in touch with? What can develop and sustain and deepen those kinds of resources? What is change? What does it mean to change things? There's lots of, I was talking to Lee earlier, who's, Lee, and I guess, the people I know, I would guess Alistair as well, are people who read books at the very leading edge of, systems, beyond systems theory in terms of self-organizing, emergence, this kind of systemic kind of, we almost don't have a language for it yet, in a way. Different kinds of leadership, different kinds of what we might mean by the word social change. I mean, what does that even mean? What might it involve? And what's the kind of spirit that somehow we can capture? And a bit what Karen was saying, I realized my project just really came from me. And now I look at my project, which, by the way, if you didn't realize, is the creation of the new National Association in the UK for NLP. You go, yeah, I got it. That's exactly, there's a real resonance and correspondence between what was in my heart and what is on the outside. And I think another theme of ours is sustainability. And again, I was talking with Lee, saying, the big thing is all about sustainability, not just on the outside as a sort of project out there, but on a kind of inner correspondence to this kind of resonance between you and the outside that has a deep ecology to it, and something that can sustain and evolve and learn in and of itself in our very, very changing, crisis-ridden, unequal, socially unjust kind of world. But so that's so lots of different projects. Do you want to say some of the projects that
I can kind of remember?
Think of also?
Yeah, that's all right. I mean, I was thinking of one, there's many. I mean, and many times people just come and they go, I just feel something in me that I want to do something. I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want to do something. And it has no form or shape except this something inside of me that is on fire a little bit. It's the passion part, right? I have a passion, but I can't quite formulate it into whatever that image would be, or that vision would be, or the idea would be, but I just know I do want to make a contribution somehow. And so, we've had many over the years, people come with they just had the feeling, and just to bring the feeling into something, something that had substance, in a vision or a better idea of it, and that comes out of what happens in sort of the generative, collaborative effort that happens in the group. I mean, just by the inspiration and the ideas, possibilities that begin to flow. And one that I remember was a young woman who basically cried for the first 2 days. She had been sat in the corner and cried for 2 days. She had for a year been trying to get a book published for another person, and this person's book was around, teaching children how to be more ecological in the world in terms of, trash and, recycling and things like that, and how to kind of educate their parents, about it, but to kind of go through the system, the younger kids, the next generation. And she'd tried for a year without pay. Nobody was subsidizing her life along the way. It got to the sort of the end of that year, and even the author of the book goes, I give up. Trash it. I'm done. no more energy left. And so she came, and it's like her last ditch effort. You know? My last ditch effort, you know. Come to here, maybe something will happen. And so she spent, 2 days, weeping, and then she kind of picked herself up and got a lot of good inspiration and some ideas with, being able to connect to other people who had ideas and had connections that could support at least the possibility in a stronger fashion. That was in September. By December, because we usually would have like a gathering in December, like a little Christmas party, but share, what happened, is the progress and such, so we had some feedback. And she had gotten over 1 million pounds, and the best job in the world that she ever wanted, which was like with the Prince of Wales Trust. And, it was like a miracle. And, that one really was shining out to me. And another one was a guy who goes, I just want to do something, I don't know what. And now there's 2 orphanages in Africa.
In Botswana.
Where he takes people every year, But just a guy, a worker guy like we all are, but he goes, I just want to do something. I just feel I just want to do something.
So modelling, which we will do again this time. So we've had some fantastic people who've come just from the group and been models. So we'll do that again this time. And we modelled David Villa Clark, who did the orphanages, and his relationship with his friend Earl, who was his inner voice of wisdom. And we modelled the 2 of them working together. And then we modelled John Spears, who was working in a big city communications thing, who was bringing in young people on the Asperger continuum into his workplace.
And I think he created a model for bringing that into the workplace. And then I think that model was also taken to Denmark.
It was taken to it was taken into Shell. And it was taken into Reed International, I think, but maybe also someone in Denmark as well. And we modelled Sarah. We modelled a very famous actress who was part of our group for a while. And her project was she read to a woman who had a really, really profoundly life-changing stroke. And so Sarah was a reader. But she also actually she met up with this woman in a home where she'd been parked in the corner for like 14 years. And everyone went, this woman doesn't communicate, she can't communicate. Sarah, because she was kind of like this exquisite communicator and very, very created ways of communicating with this woman and brought this woman more and more out of her shell. They went to art galleries in Paris together. It was this
because she was like in her 90s living in Paris as a young woman.
And then they made a film. And they made a film of it. So it was like this amazing awakening of somebody through communication. It's a fantastic project. I mean, so many metaphors in all these projects.
I think the first year we were going to do this, my father passed away just like the day before, and so I couldn't come.
Yes. Do you remember that one? The big one in the big hall.
And we had a beautiful woman from Texas.
Yes.
From Buda, Texas. From Buda, Texas. And she's a person who feeds people. Basically, I feed people. That's what I do. And this great organization of getting all the different organizations that actually provide food for people that need it, getting sort of the meta-organization or the higher organization of complex connections so that they weren't overlapping but could get to a bigger space by kind of having knowledge of where they were going. She started walking with Martin Luther King when she was 17 years old. She was a kid, it was like the 60s or whatever, and he used to come and stay at her house. And later, the man that she married was the head of the Urban League in Chicago at the time, and he was the guy responsible for bringing Martin Luther King there, so he would stay at her house. And she sort of made a commitment that if anything ever happened to him, that she would carry on his work as best she could. And she spent her life doing it, And she's awesome to model because these little tiny cute, I mean, they're easy to do, they don't cost a lot of money, and they're replicable, which was the beauty of modeling Patty was whatever she created, you had to be able to replicate it. It had to be able to kind of have a life of its own and be replicable. And, you know, they were very simple. The one that comes to my mind that was so beautiful, and it's still out there in the world in fingers, was this little 2-day, I think it was a 2-day basic health, you know, just teaching basic health, you know, water, kind of food you eat, relationship, touch, you know, be able to have an opportunity to create something, you know, create rest. It was eight little things, and created this little beautiful little 2-day journey. And she took 20 young people. I think they were Hispanic, Latino, from Chicago area, and you know, trained them. And many of them, you know, didn't speak really good English yet, but they were learning. But she taught them and said, okay, your job now is you have to pass it on to 20 more. But she would create the space. They'd have to bring the 20, but she would create the space for them to bring the 20. And it was called the 200 to 2,000 project. Well, then what happened was, you know, for the first time, these kids are kind of leadership skills are starting to kind of emerge because it gives them an opportunity to lead in a way. And so these leadership skills kind of started to emerge. Oh, boom, another project, you know. That's simple. They're simple. And she would give you everything, you know, when she said, oh, you want to do this project? Here's the videos, here's the, you know, pictures, here's the music. If you want to, just take it and go with it. And so, you know, 20 to 20 to 20. And I think one of the guys now that was very involved with that in the early days is now getting ready to run for the mayor of Chicago. So, yeah, it's another very simple kind of idea, but first of all, Patty has this belief that no matter what project she does for whoever she's doing it for, they deserve the best. You know, that's just the belief. So they deserve the best paying if the nurses are getting a place where they can go and have a space where they can relax and or meditate, or just have a space as a nurse because they work so hard, you know. And then some of the hospitals are quite, you know, poor hospitals, and the doctors get a space, but the nurses don't. So, but the belief is you get the best. So one of these little projects that she did was, you know, she said, you know, you had the first generation come. Quite often, you know, they really struggled. Let's say they came from Mexico, you know, into the United States. But that first generation, they really struggled. They worked really hard to educate, you know, the second generation who then become kind of professionals and, you know, teachers and professionals. Then the third generation sort of doesn't have the connection back to the roots anymore, basically, is how she saw it. There's not a closing of the circle. And so she goes to these companies and she goes, give me a camcorder. At this time, you know, it was the camcorders. And a camcorder didn't cost that much, you know, probably less than $100. And she'd get several big companies. Usually she's really good at shaming them into it. Come on, it's just a camcorder. Come on. So she would get, you know, a bunch of camcorders. And then she would have the second generation interview the first generation, and the third generation would make the movie. You know, and it was like so simple, but so profound for the young people. And so easy to replicate, right? So easy to replicate. But a beautiful thing. And this is kind of fallout of her. And somebody asked her, well, how did they ask? I'm trying to remember, Judith, how they asked the question. It's like, well, how do you keep the sustainability? I guess that was it. The sustainability question. You know, how do you keep going? You know, how do you keep doing that? And she goes, well, how do you not? You know, it's like the question didn't compute in a way. How do you not?
But I also like what Usha said about kind of, well, it's changed, you know, it's changed, it's kind of evolved, and I've got some different models now, and I'm trying out, so it's not like you're going, right, I have now committed to this one thing forever and ever. It's like, I've committed to a kind of process of creative, constructive kind of change in some way. There's something very organic of what you said about that process over the longer term.
Absolutely.